alluded to this a little bit, but one of the
some tree questions, man.
Yeah, one of the first and recurring questions had to do with trees, and in particular, Birds Connect Seattle brought up the fact that trees are among the most important natural features in our urban environment that have significant implications for climate resilience, social equity, public health, and biodiversity conservation. And Seattle has a goal to grow our canopy cover to 30% by 2037, but recent assessments show that we're moving slightly backwards down to 28.1% or so in the most recent survey, and with worse canopy cover losses in communities of color, and there's currently not really a clear trajectory or roadmap to correct that. So starting with you, Mr. Harold, do you believe that Seattle can meet its canopy and equity goals, and if so, what specific actions will you take to get us there?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate the question because we have to understand how we're able to ascertain all of this data, because we are now measuring it. What I said to my cabinet is we have to show our soft underbelly to everyone in this city with respect to tree canopy, period. That's why we have to renew it. No one asked us to renew the tree canopy, and it's still a work in progress. I didn't want an interim tree ordinance. So what we did is, number one, we tripled the protections on the number of trees. So the answer to your question is yes, we will get there. That's why we put that goal in place. We increased the number of trees that we're actually measuring from 22,000 to 70,000. We clamped down on removals. In the old ordinance, you could remove 3 trees per year. 3 per year. Now you can only move 2 trees every 3 years. We mandated replacement from a 3 to 1, and we found out that the loss of trees were not so much because of development as people thought. The loss of trees was on city property. The city was the biggest culprit in losing trees, and once again, we were not measuring on either our property or private property, and that's what we're doing now. In order to improve tree canopy, we have to measure it. We also decided on our 3-for-1 replacement. Remember, you have to play the long game with the trees. So every tree we now lose, we will replace 3-fold. If you look at and I hate being punitive, but we significantly enhanced the penalties for those that are violating our law. We've had developers have to pay up to $75,000 for some of the work that we didn't want. And the other thing we're doing is we're now growing our own trees here in Seattle. We're locally sourcing them. I've just given you a few high-level components because at some point I also want to talk about what we recently had come up with this conservation easement incentivizing programs on your private land, which has never really been done here in this state or in many cities. And this is sort of groundbreaking in order to protect tree canopy on private residences.
Thank you. Ms. Wilson, same question to you.
Yeah, so I live up at the top of Capitol Hill, which is both one of the densest areas in the city and one of the areas with the most beautiful, old, mature tree canopy. And I feel so privileged to live up there because it is wonderful to be in this urban environment where there are grocery stores, there is transit, all of those things that come with dense apartment style living, but then we also have all these beautiful trees. So I want people around the city to be able to live, to be able to live like that. I've definitely heard a lot of consternation on the campaign trail this year about the rate of the loss of our tree canopy and especially our mature trees in lots under development. This definitely concerns me, and I really want to dig in and understand more how we can adjust our city policies to prevent the loss of mature trees while also getting the housing density that we need. And I think we really need to both densify our city and have our city be green. And so I'm eager to dig in and figure out what changes we can make to pursue that. I also have heard the thought that we should have a Department of Urban Forestry, that our kind of tree policy should be separated out from SDCI. I think this is an interesting idea and one that is worth exploring. I think I'd like to look at the way that some other cities have done this, maybe successfully. And also believe that we need to do a lot of tree planting, especially in neighborhoods that are already heat islands and lacking good tree cover. I think we can explore creative ways to use some of our public space, including maybe parking spots in some areas to increase tree cover. And also we need to care for street trees, right? I mean, up in my neighborhood, I know the birch trees are all dying. That's a complicated issue that has to do with climate change, but I believe really we need to pay attention to the health of our trees as well.
The last question that I have for you all about, this question of the environment, both built and natural, has to do with biodiversity conservation and integrating it with climate action. Because from Birds Connect Seattle, they mentioned that there are signs that native biodiversity is declining in Seattle, both in terms of the birds counted in birding surveys and the salmons that are passing through locks, as well as the southern resident orcas in the Puget Sound. And these losses reflect the sort of mutually reinforcing crises of climate change and biodiversity. And while the city is obviously making great strides in efforts to address its approach to addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, however, has been given comparatively less attention. So starting with you, Ms. Wilson, what specific actions would you take if you were elected to better integrate biodiversity conservation with climate actions, and what kind of measurable goals would you set?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm gonna kind of fudge it, which is embarrassing because my mom, who just came into town for a couple weeks, is an ornithologist, so I feel like I should have a better answer on the birds. But I'll say that, I know that one of the issues, especially with our orcas and our salmon, particulates, plastic from tires is a big issue, and kind of runoff from our streets. And so the more we can do to shift our transportation system in a more sustainable direction and having fewer cars on our streets, it would be an important a direction to go in on that front. And then, yeah, in terms of biodiversity and birds, carving out places in Seattle with natural habitat, with native plants, places where birds can nest relatively safely seems very important. And so I know we do have a lot of great areas like that, making sure that we're preserving those areas and maybe building in more to our park system, and finding ways that in any given neighborhood, even just a little kind of pocket park can become something which has more trees and bushes and habitat that is appropriate for birds to nest in, and paying attention to what kind of plants we're planting, and yeah, I would love to talk with the experts on this, and let's make a plan.
Awesome. Mr. Harrell?
I'll address it by saying that I acknowledge the concern that there hasn't been enough talk about that. In my recent executive order, we actually looked at some other issues. We looked at, in addition to tree canopy, we looked at disease and pests, the bronze birch borer and the spongy moth and those nasty little things. So we tried to do a deeper dive on other issues that affect tree canopy. I don't think we've given enough attention to some of the other biodiversity issues, and so I'll take that back to the shop. We try to do it in many of our discussions. We try to meet with, and our administration are known for meeting with you advocates. That's why we come to community centers. That's why we have town halls. And thank you for your advocacy. So I will relay this back to our Office of Sustainability and Environment. And by the way, I think we're coming to an end, right?
We'll have one more question.
Oh, one of the things that there's been some suggestions from you that we take some of our enforcement out of SDCI. But I don't think people fully understand how it really works. So I look at SDOT and parks and all those that sort of touch trees, so to speak, and they all report into OSC. And OSC sort of governs the pace by which and the measurements by which we are doing. But I'm giving that some serious thought, too, about taking out of SDCI. So your message resonates. And with respect to biodiversity, I think we could do better there, and we commit to doing better. So we'll make sure our doors are open. And even in our recent executive order, when we looked at pest and disease control, we probably could have very easily, I could have directed them to do that as well. So we'll do better there.
You both were talking about this question of equity, and equity in particular in the canopy cover and its impacts on public space, in particular with temperature and heat islands. Birds Connect Seattle brought up the fact that tree removal and canopy cover loss is occurring throughout King County, and is threatening climate resilience, equity, biodiversity, and public health. And an evaluation found that 14 cities and all unincorporated areas of King County have minimal tree protection with no tree removal thresholds or replacement standards. And Ms. Balducci, do you see this as a problem the King County executive should address? And if so, what specific actions would you take in unincorporated areas and with the 14 cities that have weak protections?
Yeah, absolutely. Tree canopy is so important for so many reasons. Some of the top ones being air quality. Tree planting is a climate mitigation strategy. Water quality. Having trees and filtration that comes with the soil under the trees is a major path to clean water. And of course, it mitigates heat events. It makes for visual and emotional respite. They're wonderful things to have, and we should really make sure that these are equitably available. In our last SCAPS, Strategic Climate Action Plan, thank you, we made a plan to plant 1 million trees, and we exceeded it. And I think in the next one, we need to make a plan to plant 1 million trees in under-forested areas, under-canopied areas. Like, let us focus in those 14 cities and in the urban unincorporated areas that really lack trees. We don't have the ability to tell cities what to do. If a city decides in their own code to have whatever tree protections they have, that is their choice. But we can be a partner, and we can provide incentives. We can help with forestry programs. We have a wonderful forester and forestry program we can help to build, to plant trees. We have partners in the private sector. The Master Builders has recently, because trees and housing have become kind of this dichotomy in some ways, if we build more housing, we're losing trees. The folks who build the houses have started a tree planting program. And what they're focusing on is planting mature trees, not just the saplings, but like a 10 or 15-year tree so that it will be a bigger tree sooner. They're not huge trees, but they are, you need equipment to plant these. You can't just go out and plant it with your hands. So I do think the county could have a big role. We have the only role in the unincorporated areas. That's our job, and we should go do it. And as executive, I would absolutely prioritize that. But we can partner with cities, especially the ones with smaller budgets, to help them do better in their communities as well.
Thank you. Ms. Hasagawa?
Absolutely. So Councilmember Zahalai believes that the Growth Management Act has a key role to play in this as well. He says that protecting our rural, agricultural, and natural lands isn't just about saving open space and preserving trees. It's about fighting climate change, preserving clean water, protecting biodiversity, and ensuring a healthy future for our current generations and the ones that come next. As King County Executive, I will strengthen oversight, close loopholes, and ensure that protecting all of our natural lands is treated with the urgency that it deserves. His priorities, he mentioned earlier, was ensuring that the departments have the sight in the enforcement and oversight, because so much of your question was about the accountability aspect. Personally, I'm shocked to learn that there isn't a standard for tree removal and tree replacement, but there are examples of land stewardship plans that the King County could and should be able to assess and be able to implement, including the highest standard as recommended by Forterra, which is a 4-to-1 replacement standard. Additionally, as it relates to the Strategic Climate Action Plan, he says that its role is including to make sure that there's climate resilience for these communities. When you remove trees, it's impacting the people who live there and the natural ecosystem. The residents do include the flora and the fauna, and delivering equitable solutions that protect the environment of the future generations. He wants to ensure that there are grant guidelines and funding processes to support meaningful climate resiliency grants, and make sure that resources applied efficiently to maximize these resources' impacts across King County. Also, oftentimes what gets lost in this is the community role in actively having a seat at the table and having self-determination in when and how these decisions are made. He wants to invigorate the partnerships with community groups, local leaders, and technical experts, including some of the folks who are in this room, which are essential for effective climate solutions. Some of the best policies that we have seen in Washington State have been done at the guidance of climate policy leaders and advocates. Gurmai values the expertise in the room and the work of the County Climate Office at King County, as well as all of its community partners, and he will work collaboratively to bring strategies in the Climate Action Plan to life to ensure that they're actionable as well as equitable.
Awesome. from Birds Connect Seattle brought up the fact that for more than a decade, King County's comprehensive plan has called for a strategy to conserve native biodiversity in a changing climate. And this recommendation first appeared in 2012 and has been repeated in all subsequent iterations and updates of the plan. But despite this policy leadership and the increasing urgency of climate and biodiversity crisis, this strategy has never been formally implemented. And so starting with you, Ms. Hasagawa, as county executive, would you or would Mr. Zahalai commit to creating King County's conservation strategy? And if so, what would it include and what timelines would it set?
Candidate, thank you for the question. And candidate Zahalai believes that conservation is the key part of housing justice and promoting the quality of life of King County, county-wide. Gurmai is committed to delivering on the county's land conservation promises and ensuring that our forests and open spaces are preserved for today and generations to come. He wants to point out that the King County Land Conservation Program is focused on protecting forests, open spaces, and critical nature areas across the region. These efforts preserve the biodiversity, they protect water quality, they combat climate change, and ensure that future generations can enjoy healthy, accessible, clean, natural spaces. He wants to articulate that his priorities here include full support for land conservation. He is fully committed to the county's initiative to identify and protect critical forests and open spaces. He wants to deliver on promises. He supported the expansion of the county's future tax to fund land conservation and wants to ensure that these funds translate into real, tangible protection of the lands that are identified. And he wants to protect key lands. Focus on safeguarding priority forests, habitats, and open spaces that have been carefully mapped and selected for the ecological, recreational, and community value.
Awesome, thank you. Ms. Balducci?
Thank you. You know, in every campaign, I've run a few, in every campaign there comes a moment where you have to admit a little bit of ignorance and humility. When I first interviewed with that same group that didn't consider land use and transit a climate strategy, I was asked, what's your position on the city's proposed critical areas ordinance? And I had to say, the what? I'm well past that now. I know what a critical areas ordinance is, and I know its importance. But I think this is a really good question, and I'm going to take it as such. I picked up my phone for a second to look up. I couldn't remember the term, but there's this term for the fact that we tend, as human beings, to gravitate towards certain particular species and want to protect those. Is it charismatic megafauna? Yeah. The polar bears, if you will, right? And so I do think that we can fall, as government professionals, we can fall prey to this kind of thinking. I have spent a lot of time and energy, and I've gotten money invested in trying to save the kokanee salmon, the little red fish that make my district their home in all the world. We have worked really hard at salmon preservation. We tend to focus on that also because it is a food stock for the resident orcas. And so we focus on sort of like habitat in the sense of, I'm trying to fix this reach. And we do amazing projects, by the way. Amazing big projects that are preserving a habitat. The Issaquah Creek project that has been underway is incredible. But I hear this question saying that what we don't have is a systematic approach. I see nods, thank you. A systematic approach to biodiversity conservation, and that is something I will acknowledge that I need to learn more about and think about how to approach it, because I do think at the systems level is where we make the biggest difference. So I would love to talk to you and touch your birds and hear more about it. Thank you.
Thank